He interrupted her. You do not see why I am being so impertinent, mademoiselle? I am an old man and now and then, not very often, I come across someone whose welfare is dear to me. We are friends, mademoiselle. You have said so yourself. And it is just this, I should like to see you happy. Catherine stared very straight in front of her. She had a cretonne sunshade with her, and with its point she traced little designs in the gravel at her feet. I have asked you a question about Major Knighton, now I will ask you another. Do you like Mr. Derek Kettering? I'll hardly know him, said Catherine. That is not an answer, that. I'll think it is. He looked at her, struck by something in her tone. Nodded his head gravely and slowly. Then perhaps you are right, mademoiselle. See you, I who speak to you have seen much of the world, and I know that there are two things which are true. A good man may be ruined by his love for a bad woman, but the other way holds good also. A bad man may equally be ruined by his love for a good woman. Catherine looked up sharply. When you say ruined I'll mean from his point of view. One must be wholehearted in crime as in everything else. You are trying to warn me, against whom, said Catherine in a low voice. I cannot look into your heart, mademoiselle, I do not think you would let me if I could. I will just say this. There are men who have a strange fascination for women. The Comte de la Roche, said Catherine, with a smile. There are others, more dangerous than the Comte de la Roche. They have qualities that appeal, recklessness, daring, audacity. You are fascinated, mademoiselle, I see that, but I think that it is no more than that. I hope so. This man of whom I speak, the emotion he feels is genuine enough, but all the same yes. He got up and stood looking down at her. Then he spoke in a low, distinct voice, you could, perhaps, murderer, love a thief, mademoiselle, but not he wheeled sharply away on that and left her sitting there. He heard the little gasp she gave and paid no attention. He had said what he meant to say. He left her there to digest that last unmistakable phrase. Derek Kettering, coming out of the casino into the sunshine, saw her sitting alone on the bench and joined her. I have been gambling, he said, with a light laugh, gambling unsuccessfully. I have lost everything, that is, that I have with me. Catherine looked at him with a troubled face. She was aware at once of something new in his manner, some hidden excitement that betrayed itself in 100 different infinitesimal signs. I should think you were always a gambler. The spirit of gambling appeals to you. Every day and in every way a gambler. You are about right. Don't you find something stimulating in it? To risk all on one throw, there is nothing like it. Calm and stolid as she believed herself to be, Catherine felt a faint answering thrill. I want to talk to you, went on Derek, and who knows when I may have another opportunity? There is an idea going about that murdered my wife. No, please don't interrupt. It is absurd, of course. He paused for a minute or two, then went on, speaking more deliberately. In dealing with the police and local authorities here I have had to pretend to, well, a certain decency. I prefer not to pretend with you. I meant to marry money. I was on the lookout for money when I first met Ruth Van Aldine. She had the look of a slim Madonna about her, and I made all sorts of good resolutions, and was bitterly disillusioned. My wife was in love with another man when she married me. She never cared for me in the least. Oh, I am not complaining, the thing was a perfectly respectable bargain. She wanted Lecanberry and I wanted money. The trouble arose simply through Ruth's American blood. Without caring a pin for me, she would have liked me to be continually dancing attendance. Time and again she as good as told me that she had bought me and that I belonged to her. The result was that I behaved abominably to her. My father-in-law will tell you that, and he is quite right. At the time of Ruth's death, I was faced with absolute disaster. He laughed suddenly. One is faced with absolute disaster when one is up against a man like Rufus Van Aldine. And then, asked Catherine in a low voice. And then, Derek shrugged his shoulders, Ruth was murdered, very providentially. He laughed, and the sound of his laugh hurt Catherine. Winced. Yes, said Derek. That wasn't in very good taste. But it is quite true. Now I am going to tell you something more. From the very first moment I saw you I knew you were the only woman in the world for me. I was afraid of you. I thought you might bring me bad luck. Bad luck, said Catherine sharply. He stared at her. Why do you repeat it like that? What have you got in your mind? I was thinking of things that people have said to me. Derek grinned suddenly. They will say a lot to you about me, my dear, and most of it will be true. Yes, and worse things too, things that I shall never tell you. I have been a gambler always, and I have taken some long odds. I shan't confess to you now or at any other time. The past is done with. There is one thing I do wish you to believe. I swear to you solemnly that I did not kill my wife. He said the words earnestly enough, yet there was somehow a theatrical touch about them. He met her troubled gaze and went, no. I lied the other day. It was my wife's compartment I went into. Ah, said Catherine. It's difficult to explain just why I went in, but I'll try. I did it on an impulse. You see, I was more or less spying on my wife. I kept out of sight on the train. Myriel had told me that my wife was meeting the Comte de la Roche in Paris. Well, as far as I had seen, that was not so. I felt ashamed, and I thought suddenly that it would be a good thing to have it out with her once and for all, so I pushed open the door and went in. He paused. Yes, said Catherine gently. Ruth was lying on the bunk asleep, her face was turned away from me, I could only see the back of her head. I could have waked her up, of course. But suddenly I felt a reaction. What, after all, was there to say that we hadn't both of us said 100 times before? She looked so peaceful lying there. I left the compartment as quietly as I could. Why lie about it to the police? Asked Catherine. Because I'm not a complete fool. I've realized from the beginning that, from the point of view of motive, I'm the ideal murderer. If I once admitted that I had been in her compartment just before she was murdered, I'd do for myself once and for all. I see. Did she see? She could not have told herself. She was feeling the magnetic attraction of Derek's personality, but there was something in her that resisted, that held back. Catherine yes. You know that I care for you. Do you care for me? I don't know. Weakness there. Either she knew or she did not know. If only, she cast a look round desperately as though seeking something that would help her. A soft color rose in her cheeks as a tall fair man with a limp came hurrying along the path towards them, Major Knighton. There was relief and an unexpected warmth in her voice as she greeted him. Derek stood up scowling, his face black as a thundercloud. Lady Tamplin having a flutter, he said easily. Must join her and give her the benefit of my system. He swung round on his heel and left them together. Catherine sat down again. Her heart was beating rapidly and unevenly, but as she sat there talking commonplaces to the quiet, rather shy man beside her, her self-command came back. Then she realized with a shock that Knighton also was laying bare his heart, much as Derek had done, but in a very different manner. He was shy and stammering. The words came haltingly with no eloquence to back them. From the first moment I saw you, I ought not to have spoken so soon, but Mr. Van Aldine may leave here any day, and I might not have another chance. I know you can't care for me so soon, that is impossible. I dare say it is presumption anyway on my part. I have private means, but not very much. No, please don't answer now. I know what your answer would be. But in case I went away suddenly I just wanted you to know, that I care. She was shaken, appealing. Touched. His manner was so gentle, and there's one thing more. I just wanted to say that if you are ever in trouble, anything that I can do. He took her hand in his, held it tightly for a minute, then dropped it and walked rapidly away towards the casino without looking back. Catherine sat perfectly still, looking after him. Derek Kettering, Richard Knighton, two men so different, so very different. There was something kind about Knighton, kind and trustworthy. As to Derek, then suddenly Catherine had a very curious sensation. She felt that she was no longer sitting alone on the seat in the casino gardens, but that someone was standing beside her, and that someone was the dead woman, Ruth Kettering. She had a further impression that Ruth wanted, badly, to tell her something. The impression was so curious, so vivid, that it could not be driven away. She felt absolutely certain that the spirit of Ruth Kettering was trying to convey something of vital importance to her. The impression faded. Catherine got up, trembling a little. What was it that Ruth Kettering had wanted so badly to say? Chapter 27 Interview with Myriel. When Knighton left Catherine, he went in search of Hercule Poirot, whom he found in the rooms, jauntily placing the minimum stake on the even numbers. As Knighton joined him, the number 33 turned up, and Poirot's stake was swept away. "Bad luck," said Knighton. "Are you going to stake again?" Poirot shook his head. "Not at present." "Do you feel curiously the fascination of gambling?" asked Knighton. "Not at roulette." Knighton shot a swift glance at him. His own face became troubled. He spoke haltingly, with a touch of deference. "I wonder, are you busy, M. Poirot? There is something I would like to ask you about." "I am at your disposal." "Sunshine. Shall we go outside? It is pleasant in the." They strolled out together, and Knighton drew a deep breath. "I love the Riviera," he said. "I came here first 12 years ago, during the war, when I was sent to Lady Tamplin's hospital. It was like paradise, coming from Flanders to this." "It must have been," said Poirot. "How long ago the war seems now," mused Knighton. They walked on in silence for some little way. "You have something on your mind," said Poirot. Knighton looked at him in some surprise. "You are quite right," he confessed. "I don't know how you knew it, though." "It showed itself only too plainly," said Poirot drily. "I did not know that I was so transparent." "It is my business to observe the physiognomy," the little man explained, with dignity. "I will tell you, M. Poirot. You have heard of this dancer woman, Myriel? She who is the chère amie of M. Derek Kettering?" "Yes, that is the one, and, knowing this, you will understand that Mr. Van Aldine is naturally prejudiced against her. She wrote to him, asking for an interview. He told me to dictate a curt refusal, which of course I did. This morning she came to the hotel and sent up her card, saying that it was urgent and vital that she should see Mr. Van Aldine at once." "You interest me," said Poirot. "Mr. Van Aldine was furious. He told me what message to send down to her. I ventured to disagree with him. It seemed to me both likely and probable that this woman Myriel might give us valuable information. We know that she was on the blue train, and she may have seen or heard something that it might be vital for us to know. Don't you agree with me, M. Poirot?" "I do," said Poicot drily. "M. Van Aldine, exceedingly foolishly, if I may say so, behaved." "I am glad you take that view of the matter," said the secretary. "Now I am going to tell you something, M. Poirot. So strongly did feel the unwisdom of Mr. Van Eyden's attitude that I went down privately and had an interview with the lady. Eh bien. The difficulty was that she insisted on seeing Mr. Van Aldine himself. I softened his message as much as I possibly could. In fact, to be candid, I gave it in a very different form. I said that Mr. Van Aldine was too busy to see her at present, but that she might make any communication she wished to me. That, however, she could not bring herself to do, and she left without saying anything further. But I have a strong impression, M. Poirot, that woman knows something. This is serious." "Staying," said Poirot quietly. "You know where she is?" "Yes." Knighton mentioned the name of the hotel. "Good," said Poirot, "we will go there immediately." The secretary looked doubtful. "And Mr. Van Aldine?" he queried doubtfully. "M. Van Aldine is an obstinate man," said Poirot drily. "I do not argue with obstinate men. I act in spite of them. We will go and see the lady immediately. I will tell her that you are empowered by M. Van Aldine to act for him, and you will guard yourself well from contradicting me." Knighton still looked slightly doubtful, but Poirot took no notice of his hesitation. At the hotel, they were told that Mademoiselle was in, and Poirot sent up both his and Knighton's cards, with, from Mr. Van Aldine, penciled upon them. Word came down that Mademoiselle Myriel would receive them. When they were ushered into the dancers' apartments, Poirot immediately took the lead. "Mademoiselle," he murmured, bowing very low, "we are here on behalf of M. Van Aldine." "Ah! And why did he not come himself?" "He is indisposed," said Poirot mendaciously. "The Riviera throat, it has him in its grip, but me, I am empowered to act for him, as is Major Knighton, his secretary. Unless, of course, Mademoiselle would prefer to wait a fortnight or so." If there was one thing of which Poirot was tolerably certain, it was that to a temperament such as Myriel's the mere word wait was anathema. "Eh bien, I will speak, messieurs," she cried. "I have been patient. I have held my hand. And for what? That I should be insulted. Yes, insulted. Ah! Does he think to treat Myriel like that? To throw her off like an old glove? I tell you, never has a man tired of me. Always it is I who tire of them." She paced up and down the room, her slender body trembling with rage. A small table impeded her free passage and she flung it from her into a corner, where it splintered against the wall. "That is what I will do to him," she cried, and that. Picking up a glass bowl filled with lilies, she flung it into the grate, where it smashed into 100 pieces. Knighton was looking at her with cold British disapproval. He felt embarrassed and ill at ease. Poirot, on the other hand, with twinkling eyes, was thoroughly enjoying the scene. "Ah, it is magnificent," he cried. "It can be seen temperament." "Madame has a—" "I am an artist," said Myriel. "Every artist has a temperament. I told Dirick to beware, and he would not listen." She whirled round on Poirot suddenly. "Marry that English miss." Poirot coughed. Myriel came towards them. "It is true, is it not, that he wants to, on M.A. dit," he murmured, "that he adores her passionately." "He murdered his wife," she screamed. "There, now you have it. He told me beforehand that he meant to do it. He had got to an impasse, zut. He took the easiest way out. You say that M. Kettering murdered his wife?" "Yes, yes, yes. Have I not told you so?" "The police," murmured Poirot, "will need proof of that, statement. I'll tell you, I saw him come out of her compartment that night on the train." "When?" asked Poirot sharply. "Just before the train reached Lyons." "You will swear to that, mademoiselle?" It was a different Poirot who spoke now, sharp and decisive. "Yes." There was a moment's silence. Myriel was panting, and her eyes, half defiant, half frightened, went from the face of one man to the other. "This is a serious matter, mademoiselle, realize how serious." "Certainly I do," said the detective. "You, that is well," said Poirot. "Then you understand, mademoiselle, that no time must be lost. You will, perhaps, accompany us immediately to the office of the examining magistrate." Myriel was taken aback. She hesitated, but, as foreseen, she had no loophole for escape. "Very well," she muttered. "Elle will fetch a coat." Poirot had left alone together. Poirot and Knighton exchanged glances. "It is necessary to act while, how do you say it?" "The iron is hot," murmured Poirot. "She is temperamental. In an hour's time, maybe, she will repent, and she will wish to draw back. We must prevent that at all costs." Myriel reappeared, wrapped in a sand-colored velvet wrap trimmed with leopard skin. She looked not altogether unlike a leopardess, tawny and dangerous. Anger and determination. Her eyes still flashed with "They found cause" and the examining magistrate together. A few brief introductory words from Poirot, and Mademoiselle Myriel was courteously entreated to tell her tale. This she did in much the same words as she had done to Knighton and Poirot, though with far more soberness of manner. "This is an extraordinary story, mademoiselle," said M. Courage slowly. He leaned back in his chair, adjusted his pince-nez, and looked keenly and searchingly at the dancer through them. You wish us to believe M. Kettering actually boasted of the crime to you beforehand? Yes, yes. She was too healthy, he said. If she were to die it must be an accident, he would arrange it all. You are aware, mademoiselle, said M. Courage sternly, that you are making yourself out to be an accessory before the fact. Me? But not the least in the world, monsieur. Not for a moment did I take that statement seriously. Ah no, indeed. I know men, monsieur, they say many wild things. It would be an odd state of affairs if one were to take all they said au pied de la lettre. The examining magistrate raised his eyebrows. We are to take it, then, that you regarded M. Kettering's threats as mere idle words? May I ask, mademoiselle, what made you throw up your engagements in London and come out to the Riviera? Myriel looked at him with melting black eyes. Elle wished to be with the man I loved, she said simply. Was it so unnatural? Poirot interpolated a question gently. Was it, then, at M. Kettering's wish that you accompanied him to Nice? Myriel seemed to find a little difficulty in answering this. She hesitated perceptibly before she spoke. When she did, it was with a haughty indifference of manner. In such matters I please myself, monsieur, she said. That the answer was not an answer at all was noted by all three men. They said nothing. When were you first convinced that M. his wife Kettering had murdered? As I tell you, monsieur, I saw M. Kettering come out of his wife's compartment just before the train drew into Lyons. There was a look on his face, at the moment I could not understand it, a look haunted and terrible. I shall never forget it. Her voice rose shrilly, and she flung out extravagant gesture. Quite so, said M. Courage. Her arms in afterwards, when I found that Madame Kettering was dead when the train left Lyons, then I knew. And still, you did not go to the police, mademoiselle, said the commissary mildly. Myriel glanced at him superbly, she was clearly enjoying herself in the role she was playing. Shall I betray my lover? She asked. Ah no, do not ask a woman to do that. Yet now hinted M. Cos. Now it is different. He has betrayed me. Shall I suffer that in silence? The examining magistrate checked her. Quite so, he murmured soothingly. And now, mademoiselle, perhaps you will read over the statement of what you have told us, see that it is correct, and sign it. Myriel wasted no time on the document. Yes, she said, it is correct. She rose to her feet. Require me no longer, messieurs. At present, no, mademoiselle. And Deric will be arrested. At once, mademoiselle. Myriel laughed cruelly and drew her fur draperies closer about her. He should have thought of this before he insulted me, she cried. There is one little matter Poirot coughed apologetically, just a matter of detail. Yes. What makes you think Madame Kettering was dead when the train left Lyons? Myriel stared. But she was dead. Was she? Yes, of course. She came to an abrupt stop. Poirot was regarding her intently, and he saw the wary look that came into her eyes. I have been told so. Everybody says so. Oh, said Poirot, I was not aware that the fact had mentioned outside the examining magistrate's office. Myriel appeared somewhat discomposed. One hears those things, she said vaguely, somebody told me. I can't remember who it was they get about. She moved to the door. M. Cos sprang forward to open it for her, and as he did so, Poirot's voice rose gently once more. And the jewels? Pardon, mademoiselle. Can you tell me anything about those? The jewels? What jewels? The rubies of Catherine the Great. Since you hear so much, you must have heard of them. Elle know nothing about any jewels, said Myriel sharply. She went out, closing the door behind her. M. Cos came back to his chair, the examining magistrate sighed. What a fury, he said, but diablement chic. Telling the truth? I think so. I wonder if she is. There is some truth in her story, certainly, said Poirot. We have confirmation of it from Miss Grey. She was looking down the corridor a short time before the train reached Lyons, and she saw M. Kettering go into his wife's compartment. "The case against him seems quite clear," said the commissary, sighing. "It is 1,000 pities," he murmured. "How do you mean?" asked Poirot. "It has been the ambition of my life to lay the Comte de la Roche by the heels. This time, ma foi, I thought we had got him. This other, it is not nearly so satisfactory." M. Courage rubbed his nose. "If anything goes wrong," he observed cautiously, "it will be most awkward. M. Kettering is of the aristocracy. It will get into the newspapers. If we have made a mistake he shrugged his shoulders forebodingly. "The jewels now," said the commissary, "what do you think he has done with them?" "He took them for a plant, of course," said M. Courage. "They must have been a great inconvenience to him and very awkward to dispose of." Poirot smiled. "I have an idea of my own about the jewels. Tell me, what do you know of a man called the Marquis?" The commissary leaned forward excitedly. "Messieurs, the Marquis," he said, "the Marquis? Do you think he is mixed up in this affair, M. Poirot? I'll ask you what you know of him." The commissary made an expressive grimace. "Not as much as we should like to," he observed ruefully. "He works behind the scenes, you understand. He has underlings who do his dirty work for him. But he is someone high up. That we are sure of. He does not come from the criminal classes." "A Frenchman?" "Yes. At least we believe so. But we are not sure. He has worked in France, in England, in America. There was a series of robberies in Switzerland last autumn which were laid at his door. By all accounts he is a grand seigneur, speaking French and English with equal perfection, and his origin is a mystery." Poirot nodded and rose to take his departure. "Can you tell us nothing more, M. Poirot?" urged the commissary. "At present, no," said Poirot, "but I may have news awaiting me at my hotel." M. Courage looked uncomfortable. "If the Marquis is concerned in this he began, and then stopped. "It upsets our ideas," complained M. Cos. "It does not upset mine," said Poirot. "On the contrary, I think it agrees with them very well. Au revoir, messieurs. If news of any importance comes to me I will communicate it to you immediately." He walked back to his hotel with a grave face. In his absence a telegram had come to him. Taking a paper cutter from his pocket, he slit it open. It was a long telegram, and he read it over twice before slowly putting it in his pocket. Upstairs, George was awaiting his master. "I am fatigued, Georges, much fatigued. Will you order for me a small pot of chocolate?" The chocolate was duly ordered and brought, and George set it at the little table at his master's elbow. As he was preparing to retire, Poirot spoke. "I believe, Georges, that you have a good knowledge of the English aristocracy," murmured Poirot. George smiled apologetically. "I'll think that I might say that I have, sir," he replied. "I'll suppose that it is your opinion, Georges, that criminals are invariably drawn from the lower orders." "Not always, sir. There was great trouble with one of the Duke of Devizes' younger sons. He left Eton under a cloud, and after that he caused great anxiety on several occasions. The police would not accept the view that it was kleptomania. A very clever young gentleman, sir, but vicious through and through, if you take my meaning. His Grace shipped him to Australia, and I hear he was convicted out there under another name. Very odd, sir, but there it is. The young gentleman, I need hardly say, was not in want financially." Poirot nodded his head slowly. "Love of excitement," he murmured, "and a little kink in the brain somewhere. I wonder now." He drew out the telegram from his pocket and read it again. "Then there was Lady Mary Fox's daughter," continued the valet in a mood of reminiscence. "Swindled tradespeople, something shocking, she did. Very worrying to the best families, if I may say so, and there are many other queer cases I could mention." "You have a wide experience, Georges," murmured Poirot. "I'll often wonder, having lived so exclusively with titled families, that you demean yourself by coming as a valet to me. I put it down to love of excitement on your part." Not exactly, sir, said George. L happened to see in society snippets that you had been received at Buckingham Palace. That was just when I was looking for a new situation. His Majesty, so it said, had been most gracious and friendly and thought very highly of your abilities. Ah, said Poirot, things. One always likes to know the reason, for he remained in thought for a few moments and then said, you rang up Mademoiselle Papadopoulos. Yes, sir, she and her father will be pleased to dine with you tonight. Ah, said Poirot thoughtfully. He drank off his chocolate, set the cup and saucer neatly in the middle of the tray, and spoke gently, more to himself than to the valet. The squirrel, my good Georges, collects nuts. He stores them up in the autumn so that they may be of advantage to him later. To make a success of humanity, Georges, we must profit by the lessons of those below us in the animal kingdom. I have always done so. I have been the cat, watching at the mouse hole. I have been the good dog following up the scent, and not taking my nose from the trail. And also, my good Georges, I have been the squirrel. I have stored away the little fact here, the little fact there. I go now to my store and I take out one particular nut, a nut that I stored away, let me see, 17 years ago. You follow me, Georges. L should hardly have thought, sir, said George, that nuts would have kept so long as that, though I know one can do wonders with preserving bottles. Poirot looked at him and smiled. Chapter 28 Poirot plays the squirrel. Poirot started to keep his dinner appointment with a margin of 3/4 of an hour to spare. He had an object in this. The car took him, not straight to Monte Carlo, house at Cap Martin, where he asked for were dressing, and Poirot was shown into, but to Lady Tamplin's Miss Grey. The lady's a small salon to wait, and here, after a lapse of 3 or 4 minutes, Lennox Tamplin came to him. Catherine is not quite ready yet, she said. Can I give her a message, or would you rather wait until she comes down? Poirot looked at her thoughtfully. He was a minute or two in replying, as though something of great weight hung upon his decision. Apparently the answer to such a simple question mattered. No, he said at last, no, I do not think it is necessary that I should wait to see Mademoiselle Catherine. I think, perhaps, that it is better that I should not. These things are sometimes difficult. Lennox waited politely, her eyebrows slightly raised. I have a piece of news, continued Poirot. You will, perhaps, tell your friend. M. Kettering was arrested tonight for the murder of his wife. You want me to tell Catherine that? Asked Lennox. She breathed rather hard, as though she had been running. Her face, Poirot thought, looked white and strained, rather noticeably so. If you please, mademoiselle. Why, said Lennox. Do you think Catherine will be upset? Do you think she cares? Elle don't know, mademoiselle, said Poirot. See, I admit it frankly. As a rule I know everything, but in this case, I do not. You, perhaps, know better than I do. Yes, said Lennox, Elle know, but I am not going to tell you all the same. She paused for a minute or two, her dark brows drawn together in a frown. You believe he did it, she said abruptly. Shoulders. The police say so. Ah, said Lennox, hedge about. Poirot shrugged his hedging, are you? So there is something to. Again she was silent, frowning. Poirot said gently, you have known Derek Kettering a long time, have you not? Off and on ever since I was a kid, said Lennox gruffly. Poirot nodded his head several times without speaking. With one of her brusque movements Lennox drew forward a chair and sat down on it, her elbows on the table and her face supported by her hands. Sitting thus, she looked directly across the table at Poirot. What have they got to go on? She demanded. Motive, I suppose. Probably came into money at her death. He came into 2 million. And if she had not died he would have been ruined. Yes. But there must have been more than that, persisted Lennox. He traveled by the same train, I know, but that would not be enough to go on by itself. A cigarette case with the letter K on it which did not belong to Mrs. Kettering was found in her carriage, and he was seen by two people entering and leaving the compartment just before the train got into Lyons. What two people? Your friend Miss Gray was one, Mademoiselle Myrelle, the dancer, of them. The other was, and he, Derek, what has he got to say about it? Demanded Lennox sharply. He denies having entered his wife's compartment at all, Poirot said. Fool, said Lennox crisply, frowning. Just before Lyons, you say? Does nobody know when she died? The doctor's evidence necessarily cannot be very definite, said Poirot. They are inclined to think that death was unlikely to have occurred after leaving Lyons. And we know this much, that a few moments after leaving Lyons Mrs. Kettering was dead. How do you know that? Poirot was smiling rather oddly to himself. Someone else went into her compartment and found her dead. And they did not rouse the train. No. Why was that? Doubtless they had their reasons. Lennox looked at him sharply. Do you know the reason? Elle thinks so, yes. Lennox sat still, turning things over in her mind. Poirot watched her in silence. At last he looked up. A soft color had come into her cheeks and her eyes were shining. You think someone on the train must have killed her, but that need not be so at all. What is to stop anyone swinging themselves onto the train when it stopped at Lyons? They could go straight to her compartment, strangle her, and take the rubies and drop off the train again without anyone being the wiser. She may have been actually killed while the train was in Lyons station. Then she would have been alive when Derek went in, and dead when the other person found her. Poirot leaned back in his chair. He drew a deep breath. He looked across at the girl and nodded his head 3 times, then he heaved a sigh. Mademoiselle, he said, what you have said there is very just, very true. I was struggling in darkness, and you have shown me a light. There was a point that puzzled me and you have made it plain. He got up. And Derek, said Lennox. Who knows, said Poirot, with a shrug of his shoulders. But I will tell you this, mademoiselle. I am not satisfied, no, Hercule Poirot, am not yet satisfied. It may be that this very night I shall learn something more. At least, I go to try. You are meeting someone. Yes. Someone who knows something. Someone who might know something. In these matters one must leave no stone unturned. Au revoir, mademoiselle. Lennox accompanied him to the door. Have I helped? She asked. Poirot's face softened as he looked up at her standing on the doorstep above him. Yes, mademoiselle, you have helped. Always remember that. If things are very dark, when the car had driven off he relapsed into a frowning absorption, but in his eyes was that faint green light which was always the precursor of the triumph to be. He was a few minutes late at the rendezvous, and found that M. Papadopoulos and his daughter had arrived before him. His apologies were abject, and he outdid himself in politeness and small attentions. The Greek was looking particularly benign and noble this evening, a sorrowful patriarch of blameless life. Zia was looking handsome and good-humored. The dinner was a pleasant one. Poirot was his best and most sparkling self. He told anecdotes, he made jokes, he paid graceful compliments to Zia Papadopoulos, and he told many interesting incidents of his career. The menu was a carefully selected one, and the wine was excellent. At the close of dinner M. Papadopoulos inquired politely, and the tip I gave you? You have had your little flutter on the horse. I am in communication with, E.R., my bookmaker, replied Poirot. The eyes of the two men met. A well-known horse, eh? No, said Poirot, it is what our friends, the English, call a dark horse. Ah, said M. Papadopoulos thoughtfully. Now we must step across to the casino and have our little flutter at the roulette table, cried Poirot gaily. At the casino the party separated, Poirot devoting himself solely to Zia, whilst Papadopoulos himself drifted away. Poirot was not fortunate, but Zia had a run of good luck, and had soon won a few thousand francs. It would be as well, she observed drily to Poirot, if I stopped now. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Superb, he exclaimed. You are the daughter of your father, Mademoiselle Zia. To know when to stop. Ah. That is the art. He looked round the rooms. Elle cannot see your father anywhere about, he remarked carelessly. Elle will fetch your cloak for you, mademoiselle, and we will go out in the gardens. He did not, however, go straight to the cloakroom. His sharp eyes had seen but a little while before the departure of M. Papadopoulos. He was anxious to know what had become of the wily Greek. He ran him to earth unexpectedly in the big entrance hall. He was standing by one of the pillars, talking to a lady who had just arrived. The lady was Myriel. Poirot sidled unostentatiously round the room. He arrived at the other side of the pillar, and unnoticed by the two who were talking together in an animated fashion, or rather, that is to say, the dancer was talking, Papadopoulos contributing an monosyllable and a good many expressive gestures. I'll tell you I must have time, the dancer was saying, occasional, if you give me time I will get the money. To wait. The Greek shrugged his shoulders, it is awkward. Only a very little while, pleaded the other. Ah. But you must. A week, 10 days, that is all I ask. You can be sure of your affair. The money will be forthcoming. Papadopoulos shifted a little and looked round him uneasily, to find Poirot almost at his elbow with a beaming innocent face. Ah. Vous voilà, M. Papadopoulos. I have been looking for you. It is permitted that I take Mademoiselle Zia for a little turn in the gardens? Good evening, Mademoiselle. He bowed very low to Myriel. 1,000 pardons that I did not see you immediately. The dancer accepted his greetings rather impatiently. She was clearly annoyed at the interruption of her tête-à-tête. Poirot was quick to take the hint. Papadopoulos had already murmured, certainly, but certainly, and Poirot withdrew forthwith. He fetched Zia's cloak, and together they strolled out into the gardens. This is where the suicides take place, said Zia. Poirot shrugged his shoulders. So it is said. Men are foolish, are they not, mademoiselle? To eat, to drink, to breathe the good air, it is a very pleasant thing, mademoiselle. One is foolish to leave all that simply because one has no money, or because the heart aches. L'amour, it causes many fatalities, does it not? Zia laughed. You should not laugh at love, mademoiselle, said Poirot, shaking an energetic forefinger at her. You who are young and beautiful. Hardly that, said Zia, you forget that I am 33, M. Poirot. I am frank with you, because it is no good being otherwise. As you told my father, it is exactly 17 years since you aided us in Paris that time. When I look at you, it seems much less, said Poirot gallantly. You were then very much as you are now, mademoiselle, a little thinner, a little paler, a little more serious. 16 years old and fresh from your pension. Not quite the petite pensionnaire, not quite a woman. You were very delicious, very charming, Mademoiselle Zia, others thought so too, without doubt. At 16, said Zia, one is simple and a little fool. That may be, said Poirot, yes, that well may be. At 16 one is credulous, is one not? One believes what one is told. If he saw the quick sideways glance that the girl shot at him, he pretended not to have done so. He continued dreamily, it was a curious affair that, altogether. Your father, mademoiselle, has never understood the true inwardness of it. When he asked me for details, for explanations, I said to him thus, without scandal, I have got back for you that which was lost. You must ask no questions. Do you know, mademoiselle, why I said these things? I have no idea, said the girl coldly. It was because I had a soft spot in my heart for a little pensionaire, so pale, so thin, so serious. Elle don't understand what you are talking about, cried Zia angrily. Do you not, mademoiselle? Have you forgotten Antonio Pierazio? He heard the quick intake of her breath, almost a gasp. He came to work as an assistant in the shop, but not thus could he have got hold of what he wanted. An assistant can lift his eyes to his master's daughter, can he not? If he is young and handsome with a glib tongue. And since they cannot make love all the time, they must occasionally talk of things that interest them both, such as that very interesting thing which was temporarily in M. Papapaula's possession. And since, as you say, mademoiselle, the young are foolish and credulous, it was easy to believe him and to give him a sight of that particular thing, to show him where it was kept. And afterwards, when it is gone, when the unbelievable catastrophe has happened. Alas! The poor little pensionaire! What a terrible position she is in! She is frightened, the poor little one. To speak or not to speak. And then there comes along that excellent fellow, Hercule Poirot. Almost a miracle it must have been, the way things arranged themselves. The priceless heirlooms are restored and there are no awkward questions. Zia turned on him fiercely. You have known all the time? Who told you? Was it Antonio? Poirot shook his head. Was it? No one told me, he said quietly. Elle guessed. It was a good guess, was it not, mademoiselle? You see, unless you are good at guessing, it is not much use being a detective. The girl walked along beside him for some minutes in silence. Then she said in a hard voice, well, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to tell my father? No, said Poirot sharply. Certainly not. She looked at him curiously. You want something from me? I want your help, mademoiselle. What makes you think that I can help you? I do not think so. I only hope so. And if I do not help you, then, you will tell my father. But no. Disembarrass yourself of that idea, mademoiselle. I am not a blackmailer. I do not hold your secret over your head and threaten you with it. If I refuse to help you began the girl slowly. Then you refuse, and that is that. Then why she stopped. Listen, and I will tell you why. Women, mademoiselle, are generous. If they can render a service to one who has rendered a service to them, they will do it. I was generous once to you, mademoiselle. When I might have spoken, I held my tongue. There was another silence, then the girl said, my father gave you a hint the other day. It was very kind of him. I do not think, said Zia slowly, that there is anything that I can add to that. If Poirot was disappointed he did not show it. Not a muscle of his face changed. Eh bien, he said cheerfully, then we must talk of other things. And he proceeded to chat gaily. The girl was distraught, however, and her answers were mechanical and not always to the point. It was when they were approaching the casino once more that she seemed to come to a decision. M. Poirot. Yes, mademoiselle. Elle, I should like to help you if I could. You are very amiable, mademoiselle, very amiable. Again there was a pause. Poirot did not press her. He was quite content to wait and let her take her own time. Ah bah, said Zia, after all, why should I not tell you? My father is cautious, very cautious in everything he says. But I know that with you it is not necessary. You have told us it is only the murderer you seek, and that you are not concerned over the jewels. I believe you. You were quite right when you guessed that we were in Nice because of the rubies. They have been handed over here according to plan. My father has them now. He gave you a hint the other day as to who our mysterious client was. The Marquis, murmured Poirot softly. Yes, the Marquis. Have you ever seen the Marquis, Mademoiselle Zia? Once, said the girl. But not very well, she added. Through a keyhole. It was that always presents difficulties, said Poirot sympathetically, but all the same you saw him. You would know him again. Zia shook her head. He wore a mask, she explained. Young or old? He had white hair. It may have been a wig, it may not. It fitted very well. But I do not think he was old. His walk was young, and so was his voice. His voice, said Poirot thoughtfully. Know it again, Mademoiselle Zia. Ah, his voice. Would you might, said the girl. You were interested in him, keyhole. Zia nodded. Eh? It was that took you to the yes. I was curious. One had heard so much, he is not the ordinary thief, he is more like a figure of history or romance. Yes, said Poirot thoughtfully, yes, perhaps so. But it is not this that I meant to tell you, said Zia. It was just one other little fact that I thought might be, well, useful to you. Yes, said Poirot encouragingly. The rubies, as I say, were handed over to my father here at Nice. I did not see the person who handed them over, but yes. I'll know one thing. It was a woman. Chapter 29. A letter from home. Dear Catherine, living among grand friends as you are doing now, I don't suppose you will care to hear any of our news, but as I always thought you were a sensible girl, perhaps you are a trifle less swollen-headed than I suppose. Everything goes on much the same here. There was great trouble about the new curate, who is scandalously high. In my view, he is neither more nor less than a Roman. Everybody has spoken to the vicar about it, but you know what the vicar is, all Christian charity and no proper spirit. I have had a lot of trouble with maids lately. That girl Annie was no good, skirts up to her knees and wouldn't wear sensible woolen stockings. Not one of them can bear being spoken to. I have had a lot of pain with my rheumatism one way and another, and Dr. Harris persuaded me to go and see a London specialist, a waste of 3 guineas and a railway fare, as I told him, but by waiting until Wednesday I managed to get a cheap return. The London doctor pulled a long face and talked all round about and never straight out, until I said to him, I'm a plain woman, doctor, and I like things to be plainly stated. Is it cancer, or is it not? And then, of course, he had to say it was. They say a year with care, and not too much pain, though I am sure I can bear pain as well as any other Christian woman. Life seems rather lonely at times, with most of my friends dead or gone before. I wish you were in St. Mary Mead, my dear, and that is a fact. If you hadn't come into this money and gone off into grand society, I would have offered you double the salary poor Jane gave you to come and look after me, but there's no good wanting what we can't get. However, if things should go ill with you, and that is always possible. I have heard no end of tales of bogus noblemen marrying girls and getting hold of their money and then leaving them at the church door. I dare say you are too sensible for anything of the kind to happen to you, but one never knows, and never having had much attention of any kind it might easily go to your head now. So just in case, my dear, remember there is always a home for you here, and though a plain-spoken woman I am a warm-hearted one too. Your affectionate old friend, Amelia Viner. I saw a mention of you in the paper with your cousin, Viscountess Tamplin, and I cut it out and put it with my cuttings. Prayed for you on Sunday that you might be kept from pride and vainglory. Catherine read this characteristic epistle through twice, then she laid it down and stared out of her bedroom window across the blue waters of the Mediterranean. She felt a curious lump in her throat. A sudden wave of longing for St. Mary Mead swept over her. So full of familiar, everyday, stupid little things, and yet, home. She felt very inclined to lay her head down on her arms and indulge in a real good cry. Lennox, coming in at the moment, saved her. Hello, Catherine, said Lennox. Elsie, what is the matter? Nothing, said Catherine, grabbing up Miss Viner's letter and thrusting it into her handbag. You looked rather queer, said Lennox. Elsie, I hope you don't mind. I rang up your detective friend, M. Poirot, and asked him to lunch with us in Nice. I said you wanted to see him, as I thought he might not come for me. Did you want to see him then? Asked Catherine. Yes, said Lennox. I have rather lost my heart to him. I never met a man before whose eyes were really green like a cat's. All right, said Catherine. She spoke listlessly. The last few days had been trying. Derek Kettering's arrest had been the topic of the hour, and the Blue Train mystery had been thrashed out from every conceivable standpoint. I have ordered the car, said Lennox, and I have told Mother some lie or other, unfortunately I can't remember exactly what, but it won't matter, as she never remembers. If she knew where we were going, she would want to come too, to pump M. Poirot. The two girls arrived at the Negresco to find Poirot waiting. He was full of Gallic politeness, and showered so many compliments upon the two girls that they were soon helpless with laughter, yet for all that the meal was not a gay one. Catherine was dreamy and distracted, and Lennox made bursts of conversation, interspersed by silences. As they were sitting on the terrace sipping their coffee, she suddenly attacked Poirot bluntly. "How are things going? You know what I mean." Poirot shrugged his shoulders. "They take their course," he said. "And you are just letting them take their course." He looked at Lennox a little sadly. "You are young, mademoiselle, but there are three things that cannot be hurried: le bon Dieu, nature, and old people." "Nonsense," said Lennox. "You are not old." "Ah, it is pretty what you say there." "Here is Major Knighton," said Lennox quickly, and then turned back again. Catherine looked round. "He is with Mr. Van Aldine," continued Lennox. "There is something I want to ask Major Knighton about." "I won't be a minute." Left alone together, Poirot bent forward and murmured to Catherine, "You are distrait, away, are they not?" "Mademoiselle, your thoughts, they are far, just as far as England, no farther." Guided by a sudden impulse, she took the letter she had received that morning and handed it across to him to read. "That is the first word that has come to me from my old life, somehow or other, it hurts." He read it through and then handed it back to her. "Going back to St. Mary Mead?" he said slowly. "No, I am not," said Catherine. "Why should L?" "So you are, ah," said Poirot, "it is my mistake. You will excuse me one little minute." He strolled across to where Lennox Tamplin was talking to Van Aldine and Knighton. The American looked old and haggard. He greeted Poirot with a curt nod but without any other sign of animation. As he turned to reply to some observation made by Lennox, Poirot drew Knighton aside. "M. Van Aldine looks ill," he said. "Do you wonder?" asked Knighton. "The scandal of Derek Kettering's arrest has about put the lid on things, as far as he is concerned. He is even regretting that he asked you to find out the truth." "He should go back to England," said Poirot. "We are going the day after tomorrow." "That is good news," said Poirot. He hesitated, and looked across the terrace to where Catherine was sitting. "I'll wish," he murmured, "that you could tell Miss Grey that." "Tell her what?" "That I mean that M. Van Aldine is returning to England." Knighton looked a little puzzled, but he readily crossed the terrace and joined Catherine. Poirot saw him go with a satisfied nod of the head, and then joined Lennox and the American. After a minute or two they joined the others. Conversation was general for a few minutes, then the millionaire and his secretary departed. Poirot also prepared to take his departure. "1,000 thanks for your hospitality, mesdemoiselles," he cried. "It has been a most charming luncheon. Ma foi, I needed it." He swelled out his chest and thumped it. "I am now a lion, a giant. Ah, Mademoiselle Catherine, you have not seen me as I can be. You have seen the gentle, the calm Hercule Poirot, but there is another Hercule Poirot. I go now to bully, to threaten, to strike terror into the hearts of those who listen to me." He looked at them in a self-satisfied way, and they both appeared to be duly impressed, though Lennox was biting her under lip, and the corners of Catherine's mouth had a suspicious twitch. "And I shall do it," he said gravely. "Oh yes, I shall succeed." He had gone but a few steps when Catherine's voice made him turn. "M. Poirot, I want to tell you. I think you were right in what you said. I am going back to England almost immediately." Poirot stared at her very hard, and under the directness of his scrutiny she blushed. "I see," he said gravely. "L don't believe you do," said Catherine. "L no more than you think, mademoiselle," he said quietly. He left her, with an odd little smile upon his lips. Entering a waiting car, he drove to Antibes. Hippolyte, the Comte de la Roche's wooden-faced manservant, was busy at the Villa Marina, his master's beautiful cut-glass table. The Comte de la Roche himself had gone to Monte Carlo for the day. Chancing to look out of the window, Hippolyte espied a visitor walking briskly up to the hall door, a visitor of so uncommon a type that Hippolyte, experienced as he was, had some difficulty in placing him. Calling to his wife, Marie, who was busy in the kitchen, he drew her attention to what he called CE-type law. It is not the police again, said Marie anxiously. Look for yourself, said Hippolyte. Marie looked. Certainly not the police, she declared. I am glad. They have not really worried us much, said Hippolyte. In fact, but for Monsieur Le Comte's warning, I should never have guessed that stranger at the wine shop to be what he was. The hall bell pealed and Hippolyte, in a grave and decorous manner, went to open the door. Le Comte, I regret to say, is not at home. The little man with the large mustaches beamed placidly. I'll know that, he replied. You are Hippolyte Flavel, are you? Yes, monsieur, that is my name. And you have a wife, Marie Flavel? Yes, monsieur, but I'll desire to see you both, said the stranger, and he stepped nimbly past Hippolyte into the hall. Your wife is doubtless in the kitchen, he said. Elle will go there. Before Hippolyte could recover his breath, the other had selected the right door at the back of the hall and passed along the passage and into the kitchen, where Marie paused open-mouthed to stare at him. Voila, said the stranger, and sank into a wooden armchair. I am Hercule Poirot. Yes, monsieur. You do not know the name. I have never heard it, said Hippolyte. Permit me to say that you have been badly educated. Name of one of the great ones of this world. He sighed and folded his hands across his chest. It is the Hippolyte and Marie were staring at him uneasily. They were at a loss what to make of this unexpected and extremely strange visitor. Monsieur desires murmured Hippolyte mechanically, I'll desire to know why you have lied to the police. Monsieur, cried Hippolyte, lied to the police? Never have I done such a thing. Poirot shook his head. You are wrong, he said, you have done on several occasions. Let me see. He took small notebook from his pocket and consulted it. Ah, yes, on 7 occasions at least. I will recite them to you. In a gentle unemotional voice he proceeded to outline the 7 occasions. Hippolyte was taken aback. But it is not of these past lapses that I wish to speak, continued Poirot, only, my dear friend, do not get into the habit of thinking yourself too clever. I come now to the particular lie in which I am concerned, your statement that the Comte de la Roche arrived at this villa on the morning of 14th January. But that was no lie, monsieur, that was the truth. Monsieur Le Comte arrived here on the morning of Tuesday, the 14th. That is so, Marie, is it not? Marie assented eagerly. Ah, yes, that is quite right. I remember it perfectly. Ah, said Poirot, and what did you give your good master for déjeuner that day? Marie paused, trying to collect herself. Odd, said Poirot, forgets others. How one remembers some things, and he leaned forward and struck the table a blow with his fist, his eyes flashed with anger. Yes, it is as I say. You tell your lies and you think nobody knows. But there are 2 people who know. Yes, 2 people. One is Le Bon Dieu he raised a hand to heaven, and then settling himself back in his chair and shutting his eyelids, he murmured comfortably, and the other is Hercule Poirot. I'll assure you, monsieur, you are completely mistaken. Monsieur Le Comte left Paris on Monday night. True, said Poirot, by the rapide. I do not know where he broke his journey. Perhaps you do not know that. What I do know is that he arrived here on Wednesday morning, and not on Tuesday morning. Monsieur is mistaken, said Marie stolidly. Poirot rose to his feet. Then the law must take its course, he murmured. A pity. What do you mean, monsieur? Asked Marie, with a shade of uneasiness. You will be arrested and held as accomplices concerned in the murder of Mrs. Kettering, the English lady who was killed. Murder. The man's face had gone chalk white, his knees knocked together. Marie dropped the rolling pin and began to weep. But it is impossible, I thought. Since you stick to your story, there is nothing to be said. I think you are both foolish. He was turning towards the door when an agitated voice arrested him. Monsieur, just a little moment. I had no idea that it was anything of this kind. I thought it was just a matter concerning a lady. There have been little awkwardnesses with the police over ladies before. But murder, that is very different. I have no patience with you, cried Poirot. He turned round on them and angrily shook his fist in Hippolyte's face. Am I to stop here all day, arguing with a couple of imbeciles thus? It is the truth I want. If you will not give it to me, that is your lookout. For the last time, when did Monsieur Le Comte arrive at the Villa Marina, Tuesday morning or Wednesday morning? Wednesday, gasped the man, and behind him Marie nodded confirmation. Poirot regarded them for a minute or two, then inclined his head gravely. You are wise, my children, he said quietly. We're in serious trouble. He left the Villa Marina, smiling to himself. Very nearly you, one guess confirmed, he murmured to himself. Chance on the other. Shall I take a? It was 6 o'clock when the card of Monsieur Hercule Poirot was brought up to Myriel. She stared at it for a moment or two, and then nodded. When Poirot entered, he found her walking up and down the room feverishly. She turned on him furiously. Well, she cried. Well? What is it now? Have you not tortured me enough, all of you? Have you not made me betray my poor Deric? What more do you want? Just one little question, mademoiselle. After the train left Lyons, when you entered Mrs. Kettering's compartment, what is that? Poirot looked at her with an air of mild reproach and began again. Elle say when you entered Mrs. Kettering's compartment, Elle never did. And found her, Elle never did. Ah, sacre. He turned on her in a rage and shouted at her, cowered back before him. So that she will you lie to me? I tell you I know what happened as well as though I had been there. You went into her compartment and you found her dead. I tell you I know it. To lie to me is dangerous. Be careful, Mademoiselle Myriel. Her eyes wavered beneath his gaze and fell. I didn't she began uncertainly and stopped. There is only one thing about which I wonder, said Poirot. Wonder, mademoiselle, if you found what you were looking for or whether whether what? Or whether someone else had been before you. Elle will answer no more questions, screamed the dancer. She tore herself away from Poirot's restraining hand, and flinging herself down on the floor in a frenzy, she screamed and sobbed. A frightened maid came rushing in. Hercule Poirot shrugged his shoulders, raised his eyebrows, and quietly left the room. But he seemed satisfied. Chapter 30 Miss Viner gives judgment. Catherine looked out of Miss Viner's bedroom window. It was raining, not violently, but with a quiet, well-bred persistence. The window looked out on a strip of front garden with a path down to the gate and neat little flower beds on either side, where later roses and pinks and blue hyacinths would bloom. Miss Viner was lying in a large Victorian bedstead. A tray with the remains of breakfast had been pushed to one side and she was busy opening her correspondence and making various caustic comments upon it. Catherine had an open letter in her hand and was reading it through for the second time. It was dated from the Ritz Hotel, Paris. Chère Mademoiselle Catherine, it began, I trust that you are in good health and that the return to the English winter has not proved too depressing. I prosecute my inquiries with the utmost diligence. Do not think that it is the holiday that I take here. Very shortly I shall be in England, and I hope then to have the pleasure of meeting you once more. It shall be so, shall it not? On arrival in London I shall write to you. You remember that we are the colleagues in this affair? But indeed I think you know that very well. Be assured, mademoiselle, of my most respectful and devoted sentiments. Hercule Poirot. Catherine frowned slightly. It was as though something in the letter puzzled and intrigued her. A choir boys' picnic indeed, came from Miss Viner. Tommy Saunders and Albert Dykes ought to be left behind, and I shan't subscribe to it unless they are. What those two boys think they are doing in church on Sundays I don't know. Tommy sang, "Oh God, make speed to save us," and never opened his lips again, and if Albert Dykes wasn't sucking a mint humbug, my nose is not what it is and always has been. No, they are awful, agreed Catherine. She opened her second letter, and a sudden flush came to her cheeks. Miss Viner's voice in the room seemed to recede into the far distance. When she came back to a sense of her surroundings, Miss Viner was bringing a long speech to a triumphant termination. And I said to her, "Not at all. As it happens, Miss Grey is Lady Tamplin's own cousin. What do you think of that? Were you fighting my battles for me? That was very sweet of you. You can put it that way if you like. There is nothing to me in a title. Vicar's wife or no vicar's wife, that woman is a cat." Hinting you had bought your way into society. Perhaps she was not so very far wrong. "And look at you," continued Miss Viner. "Have you come back a stuck-up fine lady, as well you might have done? No, there you are, as sensible as ever you were, with a pair of good balbriggan.